Thanks, Ian.
This way. No, over there, to the table. You right? In the middle.
Hello. Nice to see everyone. I'm so pleased to be here and honoured to be invited to speak to you all. I'd like to introduce my children, Anna and John. But John, who are an incredible source of support and entertainment. Anna is studying politics and English, and is happy to roast any Tory peers at school. John is training to be a dancer and dreams of being a choreographer. He couldn't make it to Bologna because of a ballet exam. If it wasn't such a cliche, I'd like to communicate my journey to you. I grew up in Brighton in the 70s and 80s. My mother wanted to give me confidence for accidentally raised a bully. My father Merv was hardworking but distant. In my teenage years, I went from being a goth who loved Northern Soul to a goth who loved hanging out in a nightclub called Subterfuge. In the mid-80s, I thought there was going to be a revolution as Margaret Thatcher was engaged in a battle with the coal miners. They were eventually defeated. Me and my friends cried at school, and they made a dignified return to work. I fantasized about working on a magazine called The Modern Review, which described itself as low culture for highbrows. I wrote what was meant to be an amusing letter to the editor. I was thrilled when the editor wrote back, inviting me to their offices, which turned out to be his front room. I worked there from 1992 to 94. I got noticed by the right people and was soon delighted to find myself descending the Titanic-like staircase of the Atlantic Bar and Grill with Julie Birchall. My memory is hazy, partly because of the HD, but largely because of all the drugs. Beautiful people in short suits and bodycon dresses were delivering sea breezes and smoking, I meant downing sea breezes and smoking and delivering killer lines. If you remember the 90s, you weren't really there. I remember so little, but I must have been there more than anyone. Next, I got my dream job as a columnist on The Guardian and became a controversialist. I was a provocateur for hire and managed to offend everyone. When people complained to the editor, behaviour didn't support me. I was hung out to dry on the letters page. I tried to be unrepentant. but was secretly mortified. My flat became party central until in 1994 I was carried out by the men in white suits to the Priory, a £5,000 a week institution. 5,000, not 500, it was more expensive. Institution filled with celebrities, but I'm really enjoying it there. As I like institutions, a mutual friend introduced me to Tom at a party. All the men in my life had been dysfunctional, but Tom was sane and interesting. And he married in 2003. It was the finale of a long-running production of 90s excess. Anna was born the following year in a water pool in the living room of our house. When she arrived, I was expecting to be the focus of attention rather than the baby. After it took a couple of months to adjust to having someone whose needs took priority over mine. My narcissistic wound was slow to heal. Anna came slowly into view, and I fell in love with her.
Hi, my name is Anna Sheehan. It's such an honor to be able to stand in front of you today. I feel so lucky to be able to be part of this and have people listen to me. When Professor Wild told us about this trip, we were all energized and excited to be getting away. And it gave my mum a new purpose, which kept her going through a hard summer. At first I thought I'd be here just along for the ride and here to support my mum. But then Ed asked if I'd be willing to contribute, be a sort of support act for my mum. It took me a long while to think what I actually wanted to say. This is a massive opportunity, and I wanted to make the most of it, say something meaningful, interesting, and reflective of my family and I's experience. So no pressure. My mum and I have quite a unique relationship. We are very close in the way that mothers and daughters are. But also there is a certain unconventional dependence placed on me. Her having Huntington's has forged a unique bond. Her having Huntington's has forged a unique bond between us. In some ways, it is a typical mother-daughter relationship. We sit around, gossip, discuss politics, and watch TV. She loves having all my friends over, making them laugh, giving them interesting advice, and slagging off men. In other ways, it's completely unconventional because of the dynamic being a part-time carer and part-time daughter creates. I do not think I've ever been told off by my mum, unlike many of my friends who are constantly being berated. And I often wonder whether that is because she's ill or simply because that's who she is. I'm inclined to think the latter. Anyone who's met her knows she's not a massive stickler for the rules. However, there are hundreds of instances where it's become increasingly hard to separate the illness from the person. Growing up under the shadow of Huntington's has meant that I'm often not the only priority, and sacrifices need to be made to ensure my mum is properly looked after. The community we have seen at events like this is both comforting and inspiring, the likes of which we have only seen when my mum was on the trial. I remember when we found out after months of obsessing over whether she'd make the cut. She came in and said she'd made it on and was quickly off to Queen Square to begin the most amazing experience, not just for her, but for our whole family. The first time I visited her in hospital, the atmosphere was something I have never experienced. Everyone was so collectively excited, and it felt like we were all working together for a common goal. This collaborative purpose drove my mum for the subsequent year, And the hope and direction she got from being part of it completely transformed her and her outlook on life. It allowed her to finally write the book she spent almost all her life trying to, and I've spent almost all my life hearing about. It bolstered her and created a sense of an optimism in all of us. So when she got the call from Ed saying it hadn't worked, it was like watching someone receive a death sentence. It never occurred to any of us seriously that this might not actually work. Everyone, including myself, always says, well, there'll be a cure by the time you have to worry about it, when the subject of testing comes up. Now, I definitely wouldn't describe myself as an optimist, but I still have complete faith in this statement. And looking across this room today, my trust in this is only reinforced. Seeing and hearing about all these people working and researching to find treatment amazes me every day and makes everything seem a little less bleak. The future for me, my brother, and my mum is unknown, but I have a new lease of hope. And for that, I would like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll now hand back to my mum.
The day I found out how I was going to die began innocuously enough. Tom had gone to work filming a documentary about the London Underground. During breakfast, the landline rang. It was my dad's old friend, Eric. He said that there was something I should know. Murph had been diagnosed with Huntington's disease. I saw how this illness might explain some of the things I'd noticed about Murph. He was too twitchy and fidgety. When there was a hesitancy to his stride. Of course, I did the one thing you should not ever do. I googled the Huntingtons. Wikipedia made it sound like a mixture of Alzheimer's and Parkinson. But worse than both, then there were genetics. The probability of each offspring inheriting an affected gene is 50%. Well, this might happen to my brother, me, and all my brother. And if I had the gene, then my children would be at risk too. HD typically manifests between the age of 35 and 45. I was 35. I called Tom. I was in tears as I learned. As I explained what I learned. And then the phone went dead. He'd arrived in Edgware Road just after a bomb had been detonated on a train in a tunnel. It was the 7th of July, 2005. And for the rest of the day, he was caught up in the worst terror attack London had ever seen. We'd been knocked off course. There was a sense our lives were darkened around the edges. When Tom came back into Wayne, I was weeping with relief, but still unable to process the news. Soon my father became properly ill, and we urged him to Queen's Square Neurological Hospital, where they confirmed the diagnosis. The next nightmare to process was my own at-risk status. Where it's having genetic tests, I wrote a list of pros and cons. Always more cons than pros. I surprised myself when I decided I did want to know after all. When I found out I had the gene, it was as if all the lines had closed. Everything was darkening around me. There's no one who could comfort me in refrain. Someone once defined Huntington's as an illness of mourning. You lose your identity and sense of your humanity while remaining aware enough to keep a tally of every loss. For me, it started with small, unexplained absences. My car keys, a million lighters, clothes. When I lost the world city by city, familiar approaches became a scary tangle of streets, so I'd stay in the house. Bigger losses followed. I lost my sexuality, strength stopped remembering to visit me. There was one gain, our son John, who was born on a lovely day in April. It took us a long time to decide whether to have another child. But I didn't want Anna to be only child, coping with me and having no one to play with. Could I just avoid bringing another child into the world, knowing what was in store for them? I decided, perhaps irresponsibly, to procreate the old-fashioned way. When I first met Ed in the Huntington clinic, we quickly developed a scientific and personal relationship. He bore witness to me without taking sides on my arguments with Tom, as I'd wanted him to. It's hard to say. It's hard to see why he chose a specialism if people were going to be angry with him. But I admired him.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back. I love you all very much. So helping Charlotte to prepare this talk has followed on quite seamlessly from finalizing and launching her memoir together. And this has kept us both very busy during the latest wave upon wave of COVID in London and all of the various weird, turbulent events in the UK and beyond. No one's flying back on Monday, by the way, because London is closed. I just want to mention briefly, though, that Professor Leslie Jones, who Anne has already paid tribute to and who died earlier this year, was a long-standing fan of Charlotte's, and this dated back to the 1990s. In fact, it was Leslie who originally suggested that Charlotte might be a good speaker for this event, as well as the CHDI Therapeutics meeting in the spring, after reading an article about her and the book last year. Sadly, Leslie was unable to see Charlotte speak in spring and, of course, can't be with us today. But I know that she very much enjoyed reading Charlotte's book and would have been delighted to know that Charlotte was able to share her story with such a large and diverse and engaged audience at this family reunion of the network. Working closely with Charlotte, usually in her kitchen on Friday mornings, after a cycle ride across North London has also given me fresh insights into the daily realities of life of someone with Huntington's disease and how it impacts in thousands of ways that I never get to see when I meet patients in clinic or at meetings, and things I've always taken for granted. An obvious one is, as you've seen, the need to split this talk into 3 sections for Charlotte to be able to manage it. Less obvious, unless you happen to be in Palm Springs earlier in the year, is that this talk has had to be much shorter because despite all of the best efforts of everyone in this room and beyond, the reality is that the arrow of Huntington's disease still points in only one direction. On the plus side, I have learned that airport wheelchair transfers are a miraculous thing and grant a VIP status that cannot be attained in any other way. So flashback to 2014, and when I saw that she'd been allocated to my clinic list arbitrarily for the first time, I already knew of Charlotte Raven from a slightly weird combination of her public reputation and her medical records. She was a writer, a journalist, a contrarian, a thinker, early manifest Huntington's disease, struggling to come to terms with subtle loss of cognitive function, editor of the Feminist Times. My regular Google News alerts for Huntington's disease had brought Charlotte further into my awareness as the author of such Guardian articles as "Should I Take My Own Life?" and "I See Myself as a Recovering Narcissist." Discovering that this person was now going to be seeing me in the Huntington's disease clinic was honestly terrifying. As a doctor, it's often strangely aversive to interact with ultra-smart patients. They often want a why far beyond what I can provide, leaving me feeling inadequate. In short, they are harder to impress. A little cognitive decline makes a massive difference to someone whose superior intellect is their life and work. The early HD combination of anxiety, low mood, and irritability made me fear an awkward, dispiriting verbal fencing match with a cantankerous intellectual who wouldn't believe a word I told her and would then write about how crap I was in The Guardian. Despite these misgivings, being Charlotte's neurologist has always been enjoyable, and I'm not just saying that because she's here, although I won't say it's ever been easy. We quickly found a connection through the coincidental ending of both of our very long-term relationships. We agreed that all men are bastards, and promised to let each other know if we found anything that helped. This moment of shared loss and vulnerability stripped away the asymmetry of the doctor-patient circumstances. And since that time, we've worked together in close collaboration on what might be referred to as Project Charlotte, optimizing her life, quality of life, and health in the face of the progression of HD. And more recently, several other projects that Charlotte will mention. Most recently, her memoir, Patient One. I recommend the audiobook, by the way, some excellent voice talent in the afterword. One of my proudest moments since I started working on Huntington's disease was in 2017 when I first saw a graph projected in a wood-paneled meeting room at the headquarters of Ionis Pharmaceuticals in California. For the first time, we saw that the drug we'd been testing since 2015 was doing what it was supposed to do. It was lowering production of the mutant Huntingtin protein in spinal fluid. This was an unprecedented success. But of course, it was merely a numeric victory. We still had to test whether the drug would slow the progression of the disease. Injecting 120 milligrams of tominersen into Charlotte Raven's spine in 2019 was another proud moment, but I'll let her tell that story.
I hated science at school. I kept asking my teacher, what is the point of the periodic table? I'd only found one use for magnesium sulfate, was to burn it into a satisfying fire hazard. I found the Huntington's research very difficult emotionally. Every bit of good news was followed by something bad that added to my suffering. I called this HD buzzkill, but I was enthusiastic to take part in any clinical trial. I wanted to be on the RAS trial as soon as Ed mentioned it to me. I trusted him. I was suitable for the trial or heading back into my life. Ed said I was a very impatient patient. Eventually, he emailed me to say, it is overwhelmingly likely you will get on this trial. And I did. It was in a small add-on study called DEN-PEAK. It offered an open-label treatment with the Huntington's lowering drug. I was admitted to hospital for a week. At 11:43 on the second day, Ed gave me my first dose into my spine. I was going to clock of fortune. That was also my 50th birthday. I felt sick in a way that was oddly familiar. It was another drug hangover, but this time from something that was meant to be in me. It was my dealer. Later, he gave me the drug packet that proves I was patient one. I would start my experience as intense and exhausting, but worth it. In March 2021, in the middle of a COVID lockdown, Ed rang me to say, when I asked him how he was, he said, shit, I got something terrible to tell you. Ross had decided to stop the treatment. The experimental therapy wasn't working. It was the war ended again. I felt exactly the same as the moment of my original diagnosis. I'd been waking up every morning thinking about the drug. It was like being in love. Now that pinprick of light had been blacked out. Now I could see it's a step towards a cure. And I feel proud to have been a part of it. I've lived a very selfish life, so it seemed oddly fitting. This last thing I did to save myself. I ended up saving others instead. Working on my main role, and my brother Dan has helped me connect more with the people around me. I've finally been able to portray my family and friends as they really are. Perhaps I do have still do have some empathy after all. Lately I've been enamored by the stars. I've been telling people that if you go up into space, you go back in time, which blew my mind. It also blows my mind. Huntington is such a rare disease, yet it somehow attracts so many of the world's brightest and best scientists. This is the most striking gift I can imagine. Thank you to all the researchers for all you do. And thank you for listening.
Can you stand up?
There you are. Well done.
Off we go.